Over the last decade, Black youth ages 10 to 19 have experienced increased rates of suicide. Join us in welcoming Shanti Das, the founder of Silence the Shame, and Shari Nycole, the co-host of the Willie Moore Jr. Show, as they have an intimate and authentic discussion on the crisis of Black youth and suicide.
Hi, everybody. I am Shari Nycole, co-host of the Willie Moore Jr. Show, host of the Just a Thought with Shari Nycole podcast, and TV and film producer. I want to thank the Healthy Churches Conference and Dr. P for this amazing opportunity. And before I introduce our guest, I do want to set the stage for this conversation and let you guys know why it's so important. Mental health challenges and stigma continue to be a problem in our communities. From 2000 to 2020, Black youth ages 10 to 19 experienced the largest increase in rates of suicide, an alarming, get this, 78%. We invite you guys to join us in this intimate and authentic discussion on what's happening with our young people, why we must normalize conversations about mental health, and what we can do to save the lives of our young, Black, and gifted. And here to have this discussion with me now is Shanti Das. She's an accomplished entertainment industry veteran, speaker, author, and philanthropist. She's worked in the entertainment business for over 25 years, where she's worked directly with some of music's top talent like Outkast, Usher, Prince, TLC, Toni Braxton, Erykah Badu, and many more. And on a personal note, she suffered from depression and anxiety over the years and has also experienced loved ones affected with mental health disorders as well. This led to her to step away from the labels in 2009 and begin using her pain for purpose in her community of Atlanta, Georgia, and beyond. She decided to establish her very own nonprofit, the Hip Hop Professional Foundation, Inc., and the foundation was ultimately rebranded under the name Shame the Silence, Inc., the mental health movement that has led the way since 2016. Silence the Shame, Inc. has received global awareness, has become a commonly used hashtag to normalize the conversation in America. In 2018, the National Day calendar recognized May 5th as National Silence the Shame Day. The foundation curates community conversations and care, wellness trainings, creates content, and broadens awareness and education around mental health and wellness. It's an absolute honor to have Ms. Shanti Das with me now, and we're going to dive into this powerful discussion and hopefully save some lives in the process. Shanti, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It really is an honor. It's great to meet you, and I look forward to the conversation today.
It's great to meet you as well. It's so funny. I have been hearing your name, seeing videos and interviews of you for the last several years, and it's just so great for us to be finally talking about something that's really, really important. You know, as I mentioned when I was introducing you, you are an advocate and have been advocating for mental health and reducing the stigma around it for quite some time. Can you share with us, why you're so passionate about the issue, but also how that passion has grown over the years?
Absolutely, Shari. So one of my passions is music, but now my second passion is mental health. And, it really was a part of our family, just learning about mental health very early on. Unfortunately, my father died by suicide when I was just 7 months old. And to see my mom, have to navigate through that. Once I got old enough to realize what had happened, I would see my mom, sad and crying oftentimes in her room, and I didn't understand why. And it was hard for, a Black woman to be raising 3 kids, not knowing why, your spouse, took his own life. And so that was really difficult for us. And as we know, especially in the 70s, Black folks were not going to therapy.
Yeah.
And so my mother leaned heavily on her faith, which is why, I love that I'm a part of this National Church Conference today in this conversation, because I saw how my mom used the power of God to help her through it. Now, I also believe, as an adult, the importance of therapy, which again, we didn't know back then, but I do think there is room in the universe, in the world, for hashtag Jesus and therapy, as I like to call it.
Absolutely.
And so, I really hid a lot of my feelings, Shari. I never experienced therapy until my early 30s. And it was my late sister, Anjali Maria Arnold, who kind of broke the cycle of not taking care of our mental health and wellness in our family. And she sought counseling on her own when she was in college in the 80s. And so, long story short, I had this great career in the entertainment industry. But once I started dealing with adversity in the workplace, some of those feelings, right, of trauma and things that I had buried and hid started rearing their ugly head.
Yeah.
And so I remember it was like I had been in the industry like 10 years, and I was had just moved to New York City, and excuse me, was it dealing with some adversity in the workplace. And that was the first time that I had uttered the words, maybe I should just kill myself. And I thought, okay, I know sometimes we throw that around and don't necessarily mean it, but it scared me because, the sheer fact that my father had taken
Yeah.
his own life that way. And I think there was something always in the back of my head, like thinking, is something wrong with me because dad did it, that sort of thing. And so that was the first time after that experience that my sister was like, you really should go to counseling and try it out and kind of be at peace with what happened with him so that when you get stressed out, you're not looking at that as an out, right?
Yeah.
So went to counseling for about 3 or 4 months, and then kind of buried myself back into my work. And fast forward, ended up walking away at the height of my career at the end of 2009, beginning of 2010, and moved back home. And then, things were up and down. I wasn't quite sure if I had made the right decision. I felt like God was moving me to do more community service. And I'm like, what is going on? Like my whole life as I knew it, right, was kind of imploding. But, things were okay. And then in 2014, my best friend took her own life. And I had talked to her the day before it happened. And then it happened the same way that my dad took his own life. And so I unfortunately blamed myself. I couldn't figure out what the warning signs were that I had missed with her just from talking to her literally hours before it happened. And so 2015 was a tough year for me. I was what they call high functioning, depressed, although I was not properly diagnosed at that time. Just looking back at the signs and symptoms, I, know now that I was depressed. And I almost took my own life in 2015 and definitely a low point for me. I didn't attempt, but I heavily considered it and had counted up a lot of pills in my cabinet. And by the grace of God, I got the help that I needed. And that night, my sister encouraged me to text the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-TALK, which now has rolled over into 988, which is great. Instead of dialing 911, you dial 988 if you're in a mental health crisis. And then at the same time, I'm a member of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is America's Freedom Church. I've been a member for about 12 years now. Dr. Raphael G. Warnock, who's now Senator Warnock, is also my spiritual and faith counselor. And I texted him that night and he responded. And I think he and some of the other pastors had seen me coming into church in the pulpit, just crying from week to week, not really knowing what was going on. And I told him that I was, not wanting to be here. And I was thinking about taking my own life. And he said, it's time for you to get help. He said, I'll pray with you. You got to go to the doctor. And once I got the help that I needed, I started talking openly about silence to shame. It really was a hashtag back then. And I just saw so many people, friends and colleagues and other folks, commenting in a supportive way. I was really scared and anxious and not sure how people would receive it, but it was the exact opposite. And to your point, I have been doing this for a while. Since then, and it was way before the pandemic, and not a lot of people in my space, particularly in entertainment and in my community, were talking very publicly about mental health. So I'm grateful that God allowed me the vulnerability and transparency to use my platform in a way to help others in such a tough topic.
Yeah, I first want to thank you so much for just being so unapologetic about sharing your testimony. I mean, as I'm even listening to you, it really strikes a chord with me. So I want to thank you so much for that. First off, so much to unpack here. And the first thing I want to kind of touch base on is, the level of involvement, effort, resourcing that you think needs to continue to happen in the faith-based community in particular. As you mentioned, Reverend Warnock, yes, he saw that you were going through some things. He said, I'll pray for you, but he also said, I need you to get help. So what are some of the steps that our faith-based leaders need to continue to take in addressing mental health in the faith-based community? And also, are there some missteps that are happening right now that need to be, redirected or fixed for that matter?
Well, I can certainly say, I think since the pandemic, I think we all realize the importance of mental health awareness, mental health education, and prevention against, suicide. So I think a lot of churches are in a much better place than they were prior to the pandemic. even just, going back to my own church, Ebenezer. So it was in 2015 that once I got the help that I needed, the church allowed me to share openly my testimony. It was at the anniversary of Dr. Warnock's, time being at the church. And so I shared for the first time. And then I also shared in the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, publicly in the pulpit. We didn't have mental health conversations, to my knowledge. And again, I was relatively new, but from what I was told, it wasn't a lot of those type of conversations happening within the church. And so much so, we started what was called Silence the Shame Sunday at Ebenezer in 2016. And now it's since evolved into Mental Health Sunday. But I am just so proud that the church, really does a great job in the month of May to highlight it. And not just in May, we've done partnerships with other groups within the churches. And so I see a lot of different churches now holding these type of events, which is really great. Especially, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. So in the state of Georgia, I've seen, there's different things in Conyers, Georgia, and Atlanta, Savannah, so many other places. And so I do think the church is doing a better job. I just want to make sure that the programming for mental health awareness is not just in the churches in the month of May. Because, we all have mental health. We may not all have a mental illness. And so it should be a regular part of programming that we do, whether it's guest lectures and speakers. I certainly think that we should do more youth events around mental health and wellness within the church. Doing whatever we can to continue to erase stigma, because, we've heard that saying back in the day that, if you have a mental health challenge, your family or your elders are just telling you to just pray it away. And there's nothing wrong with prayer, but we've seen strides, from that. But again, I think there's still a lot that needs to be done within our communities, and especially within our faith communities, to continue to address stigma, particularly with our seniors. Because I think it is that generation that has all of this baggage, if you will, of generational trauma, years over years over years. And I think some of our seniors experience some of the highest rates of depression that we don't really talk about in the Black community. And we know that, at least physically in church, it's still a heavy percentage of our Black seniors, right? That are there. They're a part of leadership within the church, our deacons, deaconesses, and that sort of thing. And so I want to make sure that there is proper educational activities and programs and seminars geared towards our seniors as well as our young adults.
Yeah, I have to echo those sentiments. And I do want to draw us back to a stat before I go into my next question. Earlier, I mentioned that from 2000 to 2020, 20-year span, Black youth ages 10 to 19 years old experienced the largest increase in rates of suicide. That rate is 78%. And so I think sometimes we look at the issue that we're having with youth and suicide rates as a short span, kind of short run term, but actually we're talking a 20-year span. So with that in mind, what would you say are some of the biggest drivers for these high rates that we're seeing with our Black youth when it comes to suicide?
Thank you, Shari, for sharing those stats. And I would also, if I may, give you another statistic that was recently released in the last year from this CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was from 2018 to 2021. We saw a 36.6 increase among suicide for Black youth. That is troubling. It is alarming. To your point, over that 20-year period, we've seen it, that upward trajectory of that number. Black youth certainly did not used to take their own lives at those rates, based on, their white peers and counterparts. And so it's a lot of reasons that I think you can contribute the increase. Certainly the pandemic didn't help for any of our children, right? Black, brown, Asian, white American, what have you. But in the African American community, I think the isolation really hurt our youth quite a bit. And we're social beings, right? And especially in the African American community, we're active and we like to be engaged. And it was hard for us to not do that. And I think our children really suffered greatly in terms of those long lasting effects
Yeah.
from the pandemic. Also, you got to remember what we saw as a people, right? That collective
Yes.
suffering of
Yes.
seeing unarmed Black men, which we know that started way before the pandemic. But I think everybody was home to see what happened to George Floyd.
Yes.
And so it was deeply troubling for us, and it just exacerbated all of the violence against unarmed Black men, and I think it made our young Black boys that much more anxious, right, and
Yes.
sad.
Yes.
And so, and then you think about community violence and gun violence and access to weapons. Certainly I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but you know within our church communities, we got to continue to try to lobby, against some of these laws that
Absolutely.
give access to weapons
Absolutely.
and guns to our kids. Our babies are killing each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about all of that community violence that we're seeing, and we know it's due to other social determinants of health, right? And reasons that we see an increase in the gun violence. But our kids are being re-traumatized over and over and
Yes.
over again. And they don't even understand it. Their young brains, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I am a staunch mental health advocate. And knowing that our babies are seeing this violence, and then you add in social media, and you got these,
Ooh.
sites that replay these videos,
Yes.
and it's like our brains, our bodies aren't catching up to what our brains are seeing. It's
Yes.
taking, years for it to catch up with that trauma. And it's
Absolutely.
debilitating in ways. And so even for the, Black adults, I try to limit, I can't watch that stuff now. So, being able to see all of that stuff on social media, you know, again, police brutality and violence, is scaring our boys into not really wanting to be their authentic selves.
Mm-hmm.
Also, bullying. Going back to social media, I think I've heard such sad stories of. I just literally just got a call from a young lady, of a young Black boy that took his own life in a
Jesus.
rural community in Georgia. And so, back in the
Mm.
day, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s as a young girl and student. If we got bullied in school, it was bad, but we were still able to kind of escape it when we went
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you had mom and dad or your siblings, to love on you, and the extended family, right?
Mm-hmm.
That tribe and that community. And then it was kind of over until you got back to school the next day. And
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
it might subside and go away, or, leadership at the school would get involved. Now, when students get bullied, it's all over social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah.
It's just so much more in your face. And it's really troubling when you don't have healthy ways to cope when you're dealing with that sort of adversity. And then the last thing I'll just say is, there's still so much stigma in the Black community. Although I do think this younger generation is more open to talking about their mental health struggles and challenges, not all of them are seeking the help.
Mm.
That's why an organization like Silence the Shame, in my opinion, and yes, this is my organization, but I feel strongly about the need for education around mental health, because
Yes.
there's still a lot of distrust within healthcare from the Black community. We already don't trust doctors from a physical health perspective. And so you talk about the brain, and there is no blood test that you can take to see if you're struggling with depression or
Yeah.
anxiety. It's more based on our behavioral patterns. And so we got to keep educating the communities, whether it is the faith-based community, the Black community at large, and getting them to understand why being open, sharing your story, and making sure that we have more peer-led groups. Because one thing I know is that the young people, they don't like to hear from Auntie Shanti like me all the time. They want to hear from their own peers. So the
Absolutely.
more we can get these like peer-to-peer type, groups and programs set up, I think the better off we'll be, so that they in their own spaces and community can create those safe places and spaces, and hold space together and be present and talk about what their struggles are, and figure out a collective way to heal towards collective
Yeah.
healing as a Black race.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get into how we can support and or partner with Silence the Shame, I do want to turn back to a point that you continue to hammer just now, education, education, education. There may be a parent who is watching this right now who may not be able to recognize certain signs or behaviors that their child may be exhibiting that may lend itself to them needing some help. Are there 2 or 3 kind of, signs that a parent should be looking out for when it comes to their, their teenager or their grade school child, when it comes to their mental health, for them to say, okay, they're doing this, there may be a problem here?
So again, speaking from the perspective of an advocate and someone with lived experiences, and I do encourage you all to check out our website at silencetheshame.com. We also have a YouTube channel that has a lot of resources with mental health professionals. But what I can say is, again, when we experience mental health challenges, it's all based on like a series of behavior patterns, right? There are assessment tests that you can take when you go see a therapist or a psychologist, and they're going to ask you what your behavior pattern has been like. When I started going through a lot of my depression, some of the warning signs were like, not eating like I used to, or either overeating. Some people do, they undereat or they overeat. Withdrawing from friends and family. If you have a child that, is typically very active, likes to play football or volleyball or lacrosse or baseball or basketball, what have you.
Yeah.
And they just all of a sudden start kind of backing away and backing out of those activities. That's definitely a reason for a parent to pause and see what's going on. There are a lot of things that parents can look out for, and there's some wonderful resources out there. But parents, don't be afraid to parent your children. The children don't need best friends. They need parents. And I'm not saying that you can't have a wonderful relationship with your child, but in those really critical years from K through 12, you got to strike a balance there between trying to be their friend and being their parent. And just find ways to talk about feelings. Maybe the terminology or the term mental health can be really intimidating towards a child, but it's still at the end of the day about their thoughts and their feelings, right? And their reactions. So instead of saying how you're doing today, ask your child how you're feeling. That could really give you a different answer. And you got to be willing to sit there. I know parents are busy and they're working several jobs to make ends meet, and everything is expensive now in the world. And the parents have a lot on themselves too. And so parents, you got to get educated, because we don't want our children to be well, but you're not well. That's why at Silence the Shame, when we do some of our activities, we have a parent cafe, and we bring our parents along too, to educate them around the signs and symptoms for their own mental health and wellness, in addition to how to identify things within their children.
Yeah, I want to stick on Silence the Shame as we close out here. Is there anything of importance, especially now we're in the holiday season, that you want to stress to us that you guys are doing? And also for those who are interested in learning more about the organization, possibly partnering with you all, how can they do that as well?
Absolutely. So just kind of just a brief overview. So Silence the Shame, as we know, is a nonprofit. We are a 501c3. Yes, we need community support. What we do are community conversations and care, or conversations and care as we call it, where we go into the communities and have conversations around various, subjects within mental health and wellness. But then we also will include some sort of activity or exercise around wellness, whether it's yoga or meditation and that sort of thing, trying to get people used to incorporating wellness practices into their daily regimen. We also do workplace wellness trainings for major corporations. So like we can come into your company and do a training. We do suicide prevention trainings, which are called QPR trainings. And QPR is the larger organization. And we just, are certified, right, to be able to administer those trainings. We do mental health first aid trainings, which again is something that is done on the federal level, but we are trained to administer those trainings as well. We do a couple of times a year, we like to do what's called Silence the Shame Sunday dinners, which was an idea that I had because the Sunday dinner was so important in our community growing up. And I feel like we've gotten away from that a little bit.
I agree.
And so I hosted one at my home. We hosted one at a restaurant. We're looking to do more in the future where we invite a few parents and their teens, a couple community leaders, and we sit and share a great meal, but we talk about mental health. But we try to do it in ways that are a little bit lighter, right? And a little bit more palatable to talk. So we thought, what a great way to kind of get the community together to start having these conversations. What else do we do? Oh, we also do, one of our main programs is our youth cope clinic. And so we do these peer-led panel discussions, but then we also do expression stations, and we have everything from learning how to do a podcast or building a bike or just a lot, drawing, so many creative things, because we like to meet our youth where they're at. And it is about just having healthy ways to cope and finding activities and things that you can do to lighten up the load and make the day a little bit easier for you. So we also are working on an app that's going to launch early next year. We partnered with Microsoft.
Congratulations.
One of our board members, thank you. One of our board members, Darrell Booker, is director of philanthropy there, and he's been working closely with us to bring this to the market. And so it will be able to provide resources for the community, kind of gauge your mood that day on how you're feeling. And then also it will connect to a lot of the content that we have. We also have a youth ad campaign that has been out. We had we tested the waters. We were able to fund this through a grant that we received from an awareness perspective. And so we have a few billboards and posters up in the MARTA stations, and we're getting ready to go into a couple other markets. And the campaign is for our Black youth, and it's called Mental Health is Not a Luxury, It's a Priority. So we have a lot of kids in the photo with the Silence to Shame picture on, and just being able to, again, get into the communities, meeting people where they're at. And there's a QR code that takes them right to, a resource portal. So we're just, doing our best as a small organization. We're about 6 strong in terms of our staff. We still need a lot of funding. Every year is a new year, but we are grateful to every single, church, every, doctor and therapist and all our volunteers that really value the work that we do at Silence to Shame. And we believe in partnerships. We don't work in silos, because I think it is critical in the mental health conversation that we foster great relationships, and that all of the good organizations that are out there doing the work, at some point we collaborate together. And so, we welcome collaboration as much as, as we can handle in terms of, putting it together and again, being, kind of a small but mighty team. So check us out at www.silencetoshame.com. As I mentioned, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is at Silence to Shame. And you can follow us on Facebook at Silence to Shame. And yeah, just get involved, get active. We have a few events coming up. They're more outreach events, and we serve the homeless community in Atlanta. We do a big Thanksgiving dinner. It's coming up on November 20th, and we serve about 400 men, a great Thanksgiving meal. But we also incorporate some wellness activities. We have a Zumba class for the men, and we provide them with resources from a mental health perspective. And then we're doing an event in Atlanta for the seniors at a senior facility, and we're doing a holiday brunch with Christmas photos, things that we can do to just pour back into their overall health and wellness. So we really are looking to build out more of a national platform and get back out into the community. We've done events in New York and DC and Texas and California, and we're just looking to expand more. So I'm praying that, next year is our big year. We'll get that $1 million donation from somebody. I'm just putting it out there and claiming it. Yeah. But we really are, we're doing the work. Yeah. And that's the important thing. And we've been doing the work since 2016. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity that God has placed this assignment in my life. And I answered his call because he is my everything. And if not for his grace, mercy, and favor, I would not be alive today. Yeah. And so I'm grateful to God for everything and all that comes with it in trying to heal our Black community.
Yeah, well, I'm just grateful for your obedience to your assignment. You are saving lives, and it's just an absolute honor to be able to have this conversation with you. For those listening, if you're in a position to partner, to serve alongside Shanti and her team, please answer the call. Please do that. Once again, Shanti, thank you so much for just being able to have this healthy discussion with me. And I know lives are going to be impacted. I wish you nothing but continued success, and please enjoy the holiday season as well.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. I lost my sister 4